I've talked many times on this channel before about just how bad instant replay used to be in the NFL. Today, instant replay is an important part of the game, and it's hard to imagine football without it. Yes, it has its flaws, but for the most part, all of the kinks in the system have been ironed out, and replay does a good job at getting calls correct while being extremely clear about what you can and cannot challenge, all while not slowing the game down a whole lot in the process most of the time. However, that's the version of instant replay that entered the NFL in 1999. When instant replay first was implemented in 1986, not even remotely close. You see, when replay was implemented in 1986, no one knew what the hell they were doing. It was not like it is today. Referees could just stop the game whenever they wanted. Calls were routinely botched, either because the technology wasn't there, or because communication between the officials was so poor that when the official upstairs said one thing, the official on the field said something completely different. Today, I don't think a single coach would vote against instant replay, but back in 1986, when it was first implemented and the technology and execution were downright awful, being in favor of instant replay put you in the minority. Critics of instant replay were adamant that it would make already long games even longer for no reason whatsoever, especially in the 1980s when games were at their record length as they were. And man, were they right on the money when it came to this game right here. No one knew it at the time, but what was about to transpire in the fourth quarter of this game was one of the worst, most confusing, and downright illegal uses of instant replay in NFL history, and it deserves a deep dive 40 years later. It's November 2nd, 1986, and we find ourselves at Three Rivers Stadium for a battle between two of the worst teams in football, as the Green Bay Packers were going on the road to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would like to pretend that this was a big game as we officially enter the second half of the season, but it really wasn't. The Packers enter this one at 1-7, boasting the worst record in the NFC and the worst point differential in the NFC. And the Steelers enter this one at 2-6, 3 games back of a playoff spot and boasting the second worst offense in the conference, only behind the winless Indianapolis Colts. So you had two teams that both boasted bottom 5 offenses in football, bottom 5 point differentials in football, and had a combined record of 3-13. It really shouldn't be the kind of game that gets remembered all these years later, especially for two proud franchises who have played hundreds upon hundreds of games, and meaningful games for that matter, in their history. But we'll get to that. As for how the game went, as you can tell from these highlights, the Steelers absolutely dominated, taking it by a final score of 27-3, in a game that would at least somewhat right the ship and make the 1986 season bad, but semi-respectable for the Steelers, as after a 1-6 start, they won 5 out of their next 8 games, with this game being arguably their best, most dominant, and most convincing performance of the season. The defense dominated, forcing 4 turnovers, holding the Packers to just 11 first downs and 61 yards rushing on barely 2.5 yards per carry, sacking the Packers 3 times and forcing the Packers to complete just 50% of their passes with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions, with the quarterbacks on the Packers combining to have a passer rating of 43.4, well below the league-wide average of 74.1. As for the Steelers, quarterback Mark Malone was often maligned and criticized in Pittsburgh and was known for being really bad, and understandably so. He was not good considering the fact that he was a former first-round pick. But this was one of his best games with the black and yellow, as he finished the game with no turnovers or sacks, and finished with 3 touchdown passes and a passer rating of 114.3. Of the games in his career where Malone threw more than 30 passes, this was his highest ever passer rating, as he was smart, efficient, and incredibly accurate. You could make the argument that this was the best game of Mark Malone's career. This was the kind of performance that optimistic Steeler fans were expecting out of the team in 1986. And even if it came in the second half of the season, during what felt like a wasted year, better late than never, I suppose. So yeah, this game was an absolute bloodbath. And this game right here was being officiated by none other than Pittsburgh native Chuck Heberling. Now, what's interesting to note is that Heberling was never supposed to be the referee for this game in the first place. Heberling actually retired after the 1985 season. However, with the NFL needing a referee after one of their officials, Fred Silva, had heart bypass surgery during the offseason, meaning he could only work every other week, Heberling came out of retirement and was involved in this mess known as the 1986 season, where officiating was completely flipped on its head. Even with that, Heberling wasn't supposed to work this game right here that you've been watching. The referee was supposed to be Bob McElwee, but when he came down with an illness, Heberling was named the referee for this game at the last minute. Little did Heberling know what he was about to be involved with next. Because with the game being a blowout and the Steelers leading 27-3 with under 11 minutes to go in the contest, the Packers decided to wave the white flag. Remember that in 1986, there was no two-point conversion, so the Packers were down by 24 points, which today is 3 scores, but back in 1986 was 4 possessions. Maybe in a 3-possession game, they don't wave the white flag quite as easily and quite as quickly, but down by 4 scores in the fourth quarter, they just wanted to get out of there. So, on 4th and 3, Don Bracken was on to punt from his own 25-yard line, and 50-year man Rick Woods, the Steelers' 4th-round pick in 1982, was back to receive. It was a booming kick by Bracken, going 63 yards, but he might have outkicked his coverage a little bit, as Woods was able to return it 14 yards, with the Steelers starting their next drive up by 24 points at their own 26-yard line. However, there were a lot of flags on the return. After a discussion with the officials, Chuck Heberling came out of the huddle and announced his ruling, much to the dismay of the hometown Steeler fans.
Season was 1-13. Remember that way back in
Illegal
69?
block in the back above the waist on the return. Number 27, half the distance, first down.
Block in the back, going against the Steelers. Back the Steelers up inside their own 8-yard line. Except, there was one small problem with this penalty. There was one teeny tiny problem with this foul for a block in the back, supposedly on the Steelers. And that is the fact that it was called on number 27, which was worn by, absolutely no one. Yeah, there was no player on the Steelers who wore the number 27 jersey, meaning that Chuck Heberling and his officiating crew just called a foul on a player that did not exist. The broadcast went to the standard 2-minute commercial break, and when they got back from the break, you could see Steelers head coach Chuck Noll right here arguing with the officials. And if you want to know one of the problems with instant replay, as you're going to find out, none of the following footage is edited in the slightest bit. I did not touch anything. I did not speed up or slow anything down. You are watching this all take place behind my voice in real time in the middle of the fourth quarter of a 27-3 game where possession was not an issue and where the two teams had a combined record entering the game of 3-13. This, as you might be able to tell, is going to go on for a while. Chuck Noll was fuming because he had no idea who the penalty was on, seeing as there was no number 27 on his team. And instead of a good return by Woods, giving his team some breathing room, they were now starting inside their own 10-yard line, half the distance to the goal. After deliberation, the officials did some housekeeping and realized that Noll was right, and that his team did not employ a player with the number 27 jersey. So, once again, Chuck Heberling addressed the crowd, probably questioning why he ever agreed to come out of retirement in the first place, and said that he misspoke, and that there was no player on the Steelers wearing number 27. However, there was still a foul on the Steelers that couldn't be changed, so it was half the distance to the goal. So now, you had the officials saying that the Steelers committed a foul, and even though it wasn't on the man that was initially called for the foul, it was on someone. Name one of the 11 players. That didn't make Chuck Noll happy. In fact, it made him even angrier, and understandably so, because his team was being punished in his mind for a foul that his team did not commit. And then, the officials decided that they were going to go to instant replay to review the penalty. Even today, in 2026, you cannot go to instant replay to review fouls. There are some exceptions if they are completely objective fouls, like 12 men on the field, or whether an onside kick traveled 10 yards. But something like an illegal block in the back cannot be reviewed today, and it sure as heck couldn't be reviewed in 1986 by the officiating crew. There were no challenges back then, so if the officials wanted to review any and every borderline penalty, the game would take 5 hours to complete. There was a reason that this was not allowed. Yet, the officials reviewed whether the Steelers committed an illegal block in the back, despite the fact that the instant replay rules explicitly stated that fouls like clipping and illegal block in the back could not be reviewed. So throughout this entire proceeding, we had a penalty get called, we went to a commercial break, the penalty got clarified, we went to instant replay, and then we had another decision by the officials. Eventually, this entire illegal review, including the commercial break, took over 9 whole minutes to complete from the time of the punt to the time of the next play from scrimmage, which is an insane amount of time to take, as that is literally the entirety of the Super Bowl 35 halftime show from the moment NSYNC steps onto the field. But eventually, the officials determined that not only was there no number 27 on the Steelers, but there was no block in the back on the Steelers. And after this completely illegal replay review, the Steelers were not going to be penalized, and instead would get the ball on the return at their own 26-yard line. As Chuck Noll said afterwards on the confusion, "I'm not very keen on instant replay. They sent 3 guys through the flag. 3 guys knew there was a foul there someplace, but they weren't sure. And I told them it was number 27 on the Packers who pushed in the back. And then they went and checked on the instant replay, which I don't know if it's kosher to do that." As for what referee Chuck Heberling said, we talked for a few minutes, which, note from the editor here, few is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, as this entire process took 9 whole minutes, and decided there wasn't a foul against Pittsburgh. The umpire called up to the instant replay man and to verify that number 27 was on the white team, the Packers. As Heberling continued, "At the same time, we wanted to know where the end of the run was to spot the ball. Why the flag was thrown on number 27 on the Packers in the first place didn't even make sense, because you can't have a block in the back if you're on the punting team. That's not how that works. And there's no way that 3 different officials called the same foul and threw a flag for a foul on a player on the Packers that could not even be called because he was on the punting team. Basically, nothing about this situation adds up, from the initial flag to the ruling where a foul was reviewed that shouldn't have been reviewed, and the refs had to justify it somehow afterwards. I truly mean it when I say that instant replay back in 1986, in the first year of its implementation, was the Wild Wild West, where anything went and everyone was making up the rules as they went along. Instant replay was meant to correct obvious wrongs without slowing the game down. While instant replay got this right, I suppose, and even that is debatable seeing as there were 3 flags on the field at the exact same spot, This was not the spirit of instant replay, and this was the worst nightmare of the owners when it got approved. Using it for a small difference in yardage in the grand scheme of things in a 4-score game in the fourth quarter, where the review itself takes 9 whole minutes to complete and is so long that you can squeeze a commercial break, tons of shots of the fans, and some game breaks in between. Still, this has to be one of the strangest instant replay controversies of all time that has been forgotten about all these years later, and understandably so, seeing as the Steelers didn't score on the drive, the game was over, and neither team did anything of note from a positive standpoint in 1986. But even though this incident has largely been buried, it deserves to be remembered today because this was literally illegal. This was reviewing a penalty that was not allowed to be reviewed, plain and simple. And it's no surprise, based on rulings like this, why the first iteration of instant replay seemed to be gone in an instant. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.